The acrid stench of burnt ozone filled my helm, a constant reminder of the devastation we had brought upon this world. Smoke billowed from smoldering ruins, reducing the once vibrant flora to blackened husks. With his face sculpted from granite, Sergeant Holtor, a formidable Astarte, strode forward, his bolter rifle acting as a grim reaper against the flickering plasma fire. As a scout for the 10th Company under Warlord Borochka, it was my duty to stay vigilant. My senses were attuned to the whispers carried by the wind. "Brother Orkan grows impatient," rumbled Holter, his voice distorted by the voicecaster in my helm. Our master, Warlord Orkan, had a cold, firm purpose. The purge of this cursed, feral world, suspected of harboring a virulent strain of chaos taint, was just another mark on a long and bloody record. I, Brother Sarsic, had only known war since my ascension to the rank of Scout Marine. The whispers of the village seer, the innocence of my childhood, were as distant as the stars themselves. "Anything on your Auspex, Sarsic?" came the gruff voice of Brother Kestros, a veteran with a cybernetic eye that constantly scanned the battlefield. "Negative, sir," I replied, my voice straining through the vox. Just the usual Xenos signatures on this sector, scattered and disorganized. The Xenos, a twisted species of reptilian humanoids known as the Khrave, thus not as evolved as the ones we have seen on the data from the briefings. These are more feral, were little match for the raw power of the Astartes. However, their numbers were overwhelming. A writhing tide of claws and fangs crashed against our bolt of fire. Suddenly, a tremor shook the ground beneath our feet. A colossal statue, a monument to some forgotten political leader in this corrupted world, began to crumble with the movement sudden and violent. Dust rained down as a grotesque chitinous form emerged from the debris. It was a Konkar, a monstrosity of twisted flesh and bioweapons, its roars echoing through the ruined city. "Sergeant!" I barked. "Konkar incoming!" Holter grunted, creating a sound that spoke volumes in our battle-hardened language. He raised his bolter, aiming for the creature's exposed flesh. "Brothers, focus fire, tear it apart!" We unleashed a devastating volley and the air cracked with bolter fire. The Konkar roared in pure savage rage, its biocannon spitting acidic bile that sizzled against our ceramite armor. The battle was here, the stench of burning flesh mingling with the acrid smoke of the burning city. Konkar lay silent, a grotesque monument to our firepower. While panting, I surveyed the battlefield. The remaining Khrave scurried away, their primal instincts screaming for survival. Brother Holter, with a grim face beneath his battle-scarred helm, motioned for me to advance. "Scout Sarsic," he rumbled, his voice echoing in my helmet. "Fan out, search the ruins for any signs of survivors or further Xenos presence." I nodded, the weight of my duty settling on my shoulders. While the other executioners were instruments of righteous fury, my role was one of observation, seeking out hidden truths and to gather intelligence on the enemy, even in the middle of battle. As I navigated the rubble-strewn streets, the silence pressed down on me, broken only by the distant crackling of plasma fire from another part of the city. The structures here, once grand and ornate, are now mere skeletons of their former glory. Decaying frescoes hinted at a forgotten civilization, their colorful pigments dulled by time and neglect. Suddenly, a glint of metal caught my eye among the debris. Cautiously, I knelt and brushed away the dust, revealing a smooth, metallic plate half buried in the ground. Using my combat knife, I pried it loose. The inscription on the plate, etched in a language alien to me, sent a jolt through me. It wasn't Khrave guttural glyphs or Imperium High Gothic. A strange sense of unease gnawed at me. "Brother Holtor, stand by for intel," I voxed, my voice tight with urgency. "I've found something unusual." Moments later, the sergeant materialized at my side, his massive frame dwarfing me. He took the plate, his brow furrowing as he examined the inscription. "This isn't Khrave," he muttered, his voice laced with a hint of surprise. "I have never seen anything like it before." A flicker of movement caught my eye among the ruins. A figure, shrouded in tattered robes, emerged from a crumbling doorway. It moved with an eerie grace, its face obscured by its hood's shadows. Before I could react, It spoke. Astartes, it rasped, its voice a dry whisper that sent shivers down my spine. You seek to cleanse this world, but true corruption lies elsewhere. As his hand tightened on his bolter, Holter growled, "Who are you? Speak plainly, heretic." The figure stepped forward, the moonlight glinting off a chainmail hauberk hidden beneath its robes. A single gleaming eye stared out from the hood's shadow. An unnatural light flickered in the eye. "I am a survivor," it said, its voice infused with a strange urgency. "I have witnessed the truth. Under the ruins lies a chamber filled with artifacts from a bygone era." My heart hammered in my chest. Holter, ever vigilant, lowered his bolter, though suspicion remained etched on his face. "Artifacts," he echoed. "What kind of artifacts?" The figure remained silent, its single eye fixed on me. Then, in a barely whispered voice, it said a single word. "Badab." Within the chapter, the word hung heavy in the air, a name whispered in hushed tones. Badab. The uprising had an effect on the executioner's honor. Sergeant Holter's grip tightened around the inscription plate, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Explain yourself," he growled at the cloaked figure. "What do you know of Badab?" The figure hesitated, his single eye flitting between me and Holter. Finally, it spoke, its voice raspy. "This world, it served as a hidden cache during the war. The rebels entrusted their then governor with weapons, documents, and secrets." A flicker of suspicion sparked within me. The timing was too convenient. Was this figure a genuine survivor or a cunning Xenos trap? I reached for the combat blade, strapped to my thigh, ready to react. "Proof," Holter demanded it, leaving no room for argument in his voice. "Show us proof of your words." The figure nodded, a hint of desperation creeping into the voice. "Follow me. The chamber lies beneath these ruins, hidden by an ancient mechanism." We advanced cautiously, following the cloaked figure deeper into the labyrinthine ruins. The air grew thick with dust and the stench of decay. Sunlight, like a dying ember in the polluted sky, barely penetrated the crumbling buildings. After what felt like an eternity, the figure stopped before a section of collapsed wall. It pointed to a series of intricate glyphs carved into the stone. "Activate these," it rasped, "in the proper sequence." Holter studied the glyphs, his brow furrowed in concentration. He glanced at me, a silent question in his eyes. Shrugging, I activated my augury scanner. Its blue light bathed the glyphs in an ethereal glow. Data streams flooded my visor, highlighting potential energy signatures within the stonework. Carefully, I pointed out the sequence to Holter. With a grunt of acknowledgement, he moved his armored hand across the glyphs, tracing the pattern with a practiced touch. A low hum filled the air, growing louder until it reached a crescendo. Then, with a groan of tortured metal, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden passage. The figure turned to face us, its single eye gleaming with an unsettling fervor. "The truth awaits you, Astartes," it rasped. "But beware, the echoes of the past may not be to your liking." We exchanged a wary glance before Holter stepped into the passage, bolter held high. I followed close behind, my hand gripping the hilt of my combat blade, anticipation and unease churning in my gut. Beyond the threshold, the secrets of the Badab War awaited discovery. The hidden passage plunged us into darkness. My combat lamp sputtered to life, casting a narrow beam that illuminated a damp, moss-covered tunnel. The air hung heavy with the smell of stale water and decay. Following Sergeant Haltor, I found myself navigating a cramped maze of twisting passages, my pulse quickening with each passing moment. "How far is this chamber?" I whispered into my vox, the narrow tunnel feeling like a tomb closing in on me. Haltor's voice, distorted by the voxcaster, echoed back. The readings from the inscription plate indicated that Haltor was not far away, but remain alert, brother. This place could be crawling with danger. As if on cue, a skittering sound from behind sent my hand flying to the hilt of my combat blade. I spun around, the light illuminating a swarm of fleshy insectoid creatures scuttling towards us. In the darkness, their mandibles clicked menacingly. "Vermin!" Haltor growled, raising his bolt gun. A single, precise burst of bolter fire erupted from the weapon, vaporizing the lead creatures in a shower of sparks and gore. The rest of the swarm recoiled, momentarily deterred. "Keep moving!" Halter barked, leading the way with renewed urgency. The passage opened into a vast chamber, its vaulted ceiling lost in the shadows. Dust motes danced in the light of our lamps, revealing a scene both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Ancient statues depicting warriors in unfamiliar armor lined the walls. Weapons, strange and archaic, lay displayed on stone pedestals. In the center of the chamber, a black adamantium sarcophagus gleamed in the filtered light. A feeling of overwhelming power emanated from the sarcophagus, a psychic pressure that made my skin crawl. Sergeant Halter, ever the stoic warrior, seemed unfazed. He strode towards it, his heavy boots echoing on the flagstone floor. "By the throne," he muttered, kneeling before the sarcophagus and tracing its smooth surface with a reverent hand. "This is no mere cache of weapons." "What is it then, Sergeant?" "In the cavernous chamber," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Halter remained silent, his gaze fixed as he studied the ancient script etched on the adamantium. A chill swept through the chamber, and a flicker of movement caught my eye. Emerging from the shadows at the back of the chamber was a figure clad in crimson armor, its helm emblazoned with the skull of a snarling beast. "A familiar sight, wouldn't you agree, Brother Sarsic?" A cold, menacing voice echoed in the chamber. In addition to belonging to the figure, it seemed to resonate with the walls. A relic of a bygone era, a reminder of past transgressions. My heart hammered in my chest. This was no ordinary figure, it was a spectral echo, a psychic imprint of a warrior long dead. The warrior was one of the executioners during the Bardab War. The spectral warrior's crimson armor flickered with an unnatural light as it drifted across the chamber. Sergeant Halter rose to his feet, his eyes flickering with recognition. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the tremor in the air. The echoes of the past, the ghosts of long-dead battles, pressed down on us. "I am a reminder," the spectral warrior rasped, its voice a chilling echo. "A reminder of loyalty betrayed, of oaths broken. We, the executioners of old, stood with Lord Luther in his rebellion against the corrupt Imperium. Shame and anger warred within me. The Badab War was a stain on the chapter's honor, a rebellion fueled by pride and arrogance. To hear a justification from someone who had participated in it filled me with disgust. Sergeant Halter, ever the pragmatist, cut through the spectral warrior's diatribe. "Enough of this," he growled. "We are here for the artifacts, not a lecture on history." The warrior tilted his head in an inhuman gesture. "The artifacts hold a different truth than the one the Imperium teaches. The truth about corruption festers at the very heart of your so-called emperor," Halter scoffed. "Lies and heresy. We serve the Emperor's will, purging the galaxy of those who would defile it." "And who defines what defilement is?" The warrior resisted, his voice rising in intensity. "The Imperium itself is riddled with corruption and hypocrisy. We, the executioners of old, saw the truth and dared to fight for it." My mind reeled. The warrior's words, though laced with bitterness, resonated in a way that sent shivers down my spine. Had the executioners truly believed they were fighting for a just cause? Did everything I'd learned turn out to be false? Suddenly, the chamber floor shuddered. A section of the wall, previously hidden behind a tapestry of faded banners, crumbled inward, revealing a passage. "Another chamber," Halter muttered, eyeing the newly revealed passage with suspicion. "This could be a trap." "Perhaps," the spectral warrior said, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "But the truth may lie within." Halter hesitated and fixed his gaze on the dark passage. The weight of history and the echoes of betrayal hung heavy in the air. They had to decide whether to continue with the mission or to retrace our steps and inform Warlord Orkan about the chamber and the spectral warrior's presence. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Sergeant Halter stood rigid, his visor reflecting the flickering light of my combat lamp. The spectral warrior, a constant reminder of the chapter's dark past, remained eerily still, its crimson gaze fixed on the newly revealed passage. Every fiber of my being screamed caution. This could be an elaborate trap, a ploy by the Xenos, or worse, some demon spawn awakened by our intrusion. Yet a morbid curiosity gnawed at me. What secrets lay hidden in the depths of that passage? Could they truly shed light on the past, or were they merely whispers meant to further corrupt? Sergeant Halter finally broke the silence, his voice gruff. "Brother Sarsic," he rumbled. "Report these findings to Warlord Orkan. Inform him about the hidden chamber and the apparition we encountered." Disappointment gnawed at me. Part of me yearned to explore further, to delve deeper into the mysteries of the past. But Halter was right. This was bigger than us, a discovery that required the Warlord's judgment. "As you command, Sergeant," I replied, my voice laced with a hint of regret. Activating my Voxcaster, I began to relay a detailed account of our findings, the hidden chamber, and the spectral warrior's chilling pronouncements. As my message crackled through the Vox, a flicker of frustration crossed Sergeant Halter's face. "We will guard this chamber," he declared, his voice firm. "No further exploration until Warlord Orkan arrives." The spectral warrior remained silent, its presence a constant weight in the chamber. As I finished my report, a sense of unease settled upon me. The decision to retreat felt hollow, a missed opportunity to uncover a truth long buried. However, the repercussions of defying Sergeant Halter and venturing further without authorization were too severe to contemplate. We settled into an uneasy vigil, the silence broken only by the rhythmic hum of my augury scanner and the occasional groan of the shifting ruins above. The spectral warrior, a testament to a fractured past, watched us with an unreadable gaze. Hours crawled by, each one stretching into an eternity. Had we made the right choice? Only time and Warlord Orkan's judgment will tell. The air hung heavy with anticipation. Hours bled into one another, punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of my augury scanner and the occasional rumble from the shifting ruins above. Sergeant Halter stood guard, his massive figure forming a stoic silhouette against the flickering light of my combat lamp. The spectral warrior, an unsettling reminder of a fractured past, seemed to have faded slightly, with a faint hum rather than a towering crimson figure. Suddenly, a tremor shook the chamber, followed by the faint but unmistakable clang of armored boots echoing through the hidden passage. Sergeant Halter straightened up, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "Finally," he muttered, the tension easing from his voice. As Warlord Orkan strode into the chamber, a puff of dust from the passage erupted. His armor gleamed faintly in the dim light, and his helm, adorned with the skull of a snarling beast, seemed to hold our entire world in its empty gaze. The spectral warrior, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, turned its helmed head towards the Warlord. Only my rasping breath broke their tense silence. Warlord Orkan's cold and calculating voice echoed in the chamber. "Sergeant Halter, report." Halter stepped forward, his voice devoid of emotion. He began, "Warlord, Brother Sarsic has relayed the details of our encounter with this entity." He gestured towards the spectral warrior. Warlord Orkan's gaze swept past Halter, lingering on me for a brief moment before settling on the spectral warrior. A flicker of something akin to surprise crossed his features, but a stoic mask quickly replaced it. "It's an interesting development," he said, his voice betraying no hint of emotion. He strode towards the sarcophagus, his movements measured and deliberate. He ran a hand along its smooth adamantine surface, his gaze fixed on the inscription etched into its side. Sergeant Halter shifted beside me, his grip tightening on his bolter. The chamber's atmosphere crackled with tension as Warlord Orkan studied the sarcophagus. "What lies within, Sergeant?" the Warlord finally asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Unknown, Warlord," Halter replied. "The inscription is in an archaic form of High Gothic. It may take time to decipher its meaning." Warlord Orkan grunted in acknowledgement. He turned towards the spectral warrior, his gaze locked on its flickering red visor. The silence stretched thick and heavy, as if the Warlord were weighing his next words carefully. "This chamber," he began, his voice laced with a chilling intensity, "clearly served as more than a mere weapons cache. What other secrets does it hold?" For a moment, the spectral warrior remained silent, the only sound in the chamber being the rhythmic hum of my augury scanner. It then spoke in a voice that seemed to echo not just from its helm, but from the very walls themselves. "The truth!" it rasped, its voice filled with a strange power. "The truth about why the executioners once fought against the Imperium." The words hung heavy in the air, posing a challenge to the warlord. Sergeant Halter tensed beside me, his hand hovering over the bolter's grip. My heart pounded in my chest, a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity churning within me. Warlord Orkan stared at the spectral warrior, his face covered in an unreadable mask. In the chamber, the weight of history and the echoes of a long-past rebellion hung heavy. The warlord's decision now rests on the fate of the hidden chamber, its secrets, and the spectral warrior itself. "Let us hear this truth," Warlord Orkan finally said, his voice a low growl. With a glint of steel in his eyes, he continued, warning that any deviation from the Emperor's will would meet with swift and righteous fury. With a gesture that could have conveyed either agreement or defiance, the spectral warrior inclined his head. The tension escalated, setting the stage in motion. We were about to discover that past echoes impacted the executioner's future. The chamber walls vibrated with the distant rumble of approaching power armor. Sergeant Halter straightened up, a grim satisfaction etched on his face. The spectral warrior, its crimson form shimmering faintly, turned its helmed head towards the passage entrance. A plume of dust billowed into the chamber as Warlord Orkan strode in, his figure imposing even in the cramped space. His cold and calculated gaze swept over the scene, the hidden chamber, the scattered artifacts, and finally, the spectral warrior. "A fascinating discovery, wouldn't you agree, Halter?" Warlord Orkan's voice was devoid of emotion, but a flicker of something akin to curiosity danced in his eyes. "Indeed, Warlord," Halter replied, his tone respectful. "Brother Sarsik relayed the details of our encounter with this apparition." "An echo of the past," the spectral warrior rasped, its voice echoing in the chamber. "A reminder of a time when the executioners dared to challenge the Imperium's corruption." Warlord Orkan measured his movements as he approached the sarcophagus. He ran his hand along the smooth adamantium surface, his face unreadable. "Sergeant," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "activate your augury scanner. Let us see what secrets this relic holds." Halter complied, his scanner's blue light bathing the sarcophagus in an ethereal glow. Data streams flooded his visor, and a moment later he turned to Warlord Orkan, his brow furrowed. "Encrypted data files, Warlord," he reported. "Highly classified. They appear to be military strategy, battle plans, and correspondence with other dissenting Astartes chapters." A flicker of unease crossed Warlord Orkan's face. The implications were clear. The sarcophagus contained not just weapons, but evidence of a wider rebellion, a conspiracy that could shake the very foundation of the Imperium. He turned to the spectral warrior, his gaze locked on the flickering red visor. "These plans," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "do they reveal others who dare to defy the Emperor's will?" The spectral warrior remained silent for a long moment, the air thick with anticipation. It then spoke in a voice that resonated with both regret and defiance. "Perhaps," it rasped. "But before you act, Warlord Orkan, consider this. Is loyalty to a corrupted Imperium truly the only righteous path?" The question hung heavy in the air, a challenge that resonated throughout the chamber and beyond. Warlord Orkan stared at the spectral warrior, his face masking conflicting emotions. Suddenly, a tremor shook the chamber, originating from the newly revealed passage behind the tapestry. The sound of clattering stones and approaching footsteps filled the air. "More of them!" Sergeant Halter growled as his hand tightened on his bolter. The spectral warrior turned his attention to the passage's shimmering form, flickering with renewed tension. Warlord Orkan remained motionless, with his gaze fixed on the spectral warrior, but a flicker of doubt clouded his eyes, a crack in the facade of loyalty. An uncomfortable truth emerged from the echoes of the past. The executioner's history was not as clear-cut as they had learned. The scene faded to black, leaving echoes of the past, the weight of history, and the burden of loyalty hanging in the balance. The fate of the hidden chamber, its secrets, and the spectral warrior remained unclear, waiting for Warlord Orkhan's judgment to decide their future. This judgment, however, would have to wait as a new threat emerged, forcing the executioners to confront a more immediate danger. The tremor subsided, replaced by an unnatural silence. Warlord Orkhan whirled around, his hand flashing to his bolt pistol. The spectral warrior mirrored his movements, his crimson form evoking an aura of barely contained power. From the shadows of the newly revealed passage, a figure emerged. Not a Xenos warrior as we expected, but a cloaked human, his face obscured in darkness. He raised his hand in a gesture of peace. "Hold your fire, Astartes," he rasped, his voice surprisingly calm in the tense atmosphere. "I come not as an enemy, but as a descendant of those who guarded this chamber for generations." Sergeant Holter lowered his bolter, though suspicion remained etched on his face. "Who are you?" he growled. The figure stepped into the light, revealing weathered features and eyes that held a flicker of recognition. "My name is Cyrus," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "After the rebellion, they entrusted this chamber to my ancestors. They understood the potential danger of the truth, yet they also understood its irreversibility." Warlord Orkhan looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "The truth," he echoed. "What truth are you referring to?" Cyrus gestured towards the sarcophagus. "The truth about the Badab War. It wasn't just about pride or defiance. There was corruption within the Imperium, a cancerous growth that threatened us all." He turned towards the spectral warrior, a flicker of sadness crossing his features. And this warrior was a loyal son of the executioners, forced to fight against a corrupt system. The chamber fell silent once more, the weight of history pressing down on us. Warlord Orkhan glanced from Cyrus to the spectral warrior, then back to the sarcophagus. A decision had to be made. "Sergeant Holter," he finally spoke, his voice gruff but laced with a newfound respect. "Secure the chamber. Brother Sarsik, please relay a message to the fleet. We have much to discuss." With that, Warlord Orkhan turned and stalked towards the passage, Cyrus trailing behind him. The spectral warrior remained motionless, a silent sentinel guarding the secrets of the past. Though the echoes of the Badab War remained unabated, they might now be comprehensible. As the dust settled, I couldn't help but feel a sliver of hope. Perhaps the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, could pave the way for a better future, not just for the executioners, but for the Imperium as a whole.